Jackson stood outside the gleaming glass doors of Elite Motors, his heartbeat matching the rhythm of his latest platinum single. The Los Angeles sun beat down on his designer sunglasses as he adjusted his leather jacket. Today wasn't about the music or the fame, it was about treating himself to something special. After his third album hit #1, they're gonna roll out the red carpet, his friend Tyler had said earlier that morning. You're literally the biggest artist right now. Jackson smiled at the thought. He'd come a long way from recording songs in his cousin's basement. Now his face was on billboards. His music played in every club and millions of fans knew his lyrics by heart. But he never forgot where he came from. That's why he wanted this car, not just as a status symbol but as a reminder that his hard work had paid off. He pushed open the door and stepped into the air-conditioned showroom. The place smelled of new leather and money. Sleek vehicles in every color imaginable gleamed under perfect lighting, each one more expensive than the house he grew up in. A few customers wandered around, speaking in hushed tones with salespeople in crisp suits. Jackson noticed how they all seemed to belong here. The wealthy businessmen, the old money couples, the tech entrepreneurs. Despite his success, he felt a familiar twinge of being an outsider. "Can I help you?" Jackson turned to see a salesman approaching. The man was in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I'm interested in the new Phantom Spectre," Jackson said, referring to the limited edition luxury car he'd researched for months. Only 50 existed worldwide, and he knew Elite Motors had received one. The salesman, his name tag read Richard, looked Jackson up and down. His eyes lingered on Jackson's sneakers, his gold chain, the tattoos visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves. "The Phantom Spectre? That's our premium vehicle," Richard said slowly. "Perhaps I could show you something more suitable?" Jackson felt his jaw tighten. He knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't the first time, and it probably wouldn't be the last, but he'd thought things would be different now. "I know what it is," Jackson replied calmly. "And I can afford it." Richard's smile tightened. "Of course, sir. But the Spectre is spoken for. We have a waiting list of preferred customers. I called last week. Your manager said it was available." "Things change quickly with our exclusive models," Richard said with a dismissive wave. "Let me show you our sport coupe line. More youthful, more your style." By now, other salespeople had noticed the conversation. A few customers were stealing glances, too. Jackson felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in his chest. The same feeling from when security guards followed him in stores before he was famous. When restaurants claimed to be fully booked despite empty tables. He was about to respond when another salesperson approached, younger, eager, starstruck. "Mr. Jackson? Oh my God, I love your music. Your last album got me through a tough breakup," the young man said, completely ignoring Richard. "Thanks, man," Jackson replied, genuinely touched by the recognition. "Blake," Richard warned, "I'm handling this customer." "This customer?" Blake's eyes widened. "This is Jackson King." The Jackson King. Richard's face remained impassive, but a flicker of recognition, or maybe doubt, crossed his features. "I don't follow the current music scene," Richard said stiffly. A small crowd had gathered now. Someone asked for Jackson's autograph. Another took a discreet photo. The manager emerged from his office, alerted by the commotion. "What's happening here?" the manager asked, his forced smile betraying his concern about a scene in his pristine showroom. "This gentleman wants to see the Phantom Spectre," Richard explained, emphasizing gentleman in a way that suggested the opposite. "Jackson King," Blake jumped in. "He's interested in our flagship model." The manager's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. King, of course. We're honored to have you." "Richard, why didn't you inform me immediately?" Richard's face flushed. "I was unaware of who—" "Please, come to my office," the manager interrupted, gesturing Jackson toward the back. "Richard, prepare the Spectre for a test drive immediately." As they walked away, Jackson heard Richard protesting. "But the Carringtons are coming at 3 to—" "Now, Richard." In the manager's office, apologies flowed freely. The manager, David Mitchell, according to his desk nameplate, offered Jackson espresso from an expensive machine and talked about how his daughter was a huge fan. "I can't tell you how embarrassed I am," Mitchell said, sliding a brochure across his immaculate desk. "Richard is from the old school. He'll be dealt with appropriately." Jackson nodded, but the sting of the initial rejection hadn't faded. He'd experienced this treatment his entire life, being judged by his appearance, his background, his race. But he'd foolishly thought his success would shield him now. The fact that he was only being respected because of his fame made it worse somehow. "The car will be ready momentarily," Mitchell continued. "We can discuss financing options if—" "I'll be paying cash," Jackson interrupted. Mitchell's eyebrows raised. "The Spectre is $2.7 million. "I know," Jackson maintained eye contact. "Cash." 30 minutes later, Jackson was sitting behind the wheel of the Phantom Spectre, Richard uncomfortably in the passenger seat for the test drive. The car was everything he'd dreamed of, powerful, luxurious, exclusive. But as they drove through Beverly Hills, the joy he'd expected to feel was tainted by what had happened in the showroom. "Take her right here," Richard instructed stiffly. "The handling is best experienced on winding roads." Jackson followed the directions, accelerating smoothly as they headed toward the canyon roads. The engine purred like a contented lion. "You know," Jackson said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "before my first album dropped, I worked 3 jobs to help my mom pay rent." Richard shifted in his leather seat. "Is that so?" "Yeah. Fast food morning shifts, warehouse work afternoons, and nightclub security on weekends. Recorded music whenever I could find time." Richard nodded, clearly uninterested in Jackson's life story. "When my first single hit the radio, I was still living in a tiny apartment with my cousin. No one believed in me except my family and close friends. The vehicle has 16 speakers customized by Austrian sound engineers," Richard replied, changing the subject. "Perfect for experiencing music," Jackson pressed on. "My point is, you looked at me today and made assumptions. You decided what I deserved based on how I look." Richard's jaw tightened. "Mr. King, I assure you—" "You don't have to explain," Jackson cut him off. "It happens all the time. But here's what you missed. I worked harder than anyone I know to get here. Nothing was handed to me." They turned around and headed back toward the dealership. Jackson was already deciding he wouldn't buy the car here despite how perfect it was. The experience had been ruined. As they pulled back into Elite Motors, a crowd had gathered outside. Word had spread on social media that Jackson King was there. Fans pressed against the windows, phones raised to capture a glimpse of their idol. Blake was frantically trying to maintain order while looking thrilled at the attention the dealership was getting. Jackson parked the car and handed the keys to Richard. "Beautiful machine," he said, "but I think I'll be making my purchase elsewhere." Richard's face fell. "Mr. King, if this is about our earlier misunderstanding—" "It's not a misunderstanding when it happens your whole life," Jackson replied, his voice level but firm. "Tell Mr. Mitchell I appreciate his time." As Jackson walked toward the exit, Mitchell intercepted him, panic evident in his eyes. "Mr. King, was there something wrong with the vehicle?" "We can arrange any customizations you'd like. The car's perfect," Jackson assured him. The experience wasn't. Outside, fans cheered as Jackson emerged. He took time to sign autographs and take selfies, his public smile masking the disappointment he felt inside. One young fan, probably no more than 16, looked at him with admiration. "Your music helps me believe I can make it too," the boy said. "Even when people tell me I can't." Something clicked in Jackson's mind at that moment. This humiliating experience didn't have to be just another story of rejection. It could be something more, a teachable moment not just for Richard or Elite Motors, but for all the kids who felt judged before they opened their mouths. As he drove away in his current car, still impressive but not what he'd hoped to be driving today, Jackson began forming a plan. This rejection wouldn't be the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning. He pulled over and called his manager. "Devin, I need you to set up a meeting with my team tomorrow," Jackson said, a new determination in his voice. "I've got an idea for something big." "What kind of big?" Devin asked cautiously. Jackson watched as Elite Motors disappeared in his rearview mirror. "The kind that changes the conversation," he replied. "The kind that turns rejection into something powerful." As he merged onto the highway, his mind was already racing with possibilities. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about all the doors that had ever been closed in his face, and how he might open them for others. Little did Richard know that his dismissive attitude would spark something that would soon have the whole world talking about Jackson King, and it had nothing to do with his music. The next morning, Jackson sat at the head of the conference table in his record label's main office. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the platinum records that lined the walls. Tangible proof of his success. Around the table sat his inner circle. Devin, his manager, Zoe, his publicist, Alex, his creative director, and Luis, his childhood friend who now handled his business investments. "So let me get this straight," Devin said, leaning forward. "You walked away from your dream car because some salesman was rude to you?" Jackson shook his head. "That's missing the point. It wasn't about rudeness. It was about being judged before I even opened my mouth." "And now you want to do what exactly?" Zoe asked, her fingers poised over her tablet, ready to take notes. Jackson took a deep breath. "I want to create a program that helps young people from neighborhoods like mine break into industries where doors are usually closed to them. Not just music, fashion, finance, tech, automotive." Luis nodded slowly. "I like where this is going. And I want to start with Elite Motors," Jackson continued. "I want to approach them about creating an apprenticeship program for young people from underserved communities. Train them in sales, mechanics, design, the whole business." The room fell silent as his team processed the idea. "That's not what I expected," Devin admitted. "I thought you were planning some kind of public call-out." Jackson leaned back in his chair. "What would that accomplish? Another social media storm that blows over in a week? I want something lasting." Zoe was already typing rapidly. "This could be huge for your brand. Music superstar turns rejection into opportunity for others. The press will love it." "I don't care about my brand right now," Jackson said firmly. "This isn't a publicity stunt. This is about creating real change." Alex, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "What if we documented the whole process? Not just for publicity, but to show the real challenges. The good, the bad, everything." Jackson pointed at Alex. "That's exactly what I was thinking. A documentary series following these kids as they enter spaces they've been told they don't belong in." Devin looked skeptical. "And you think Elite Motors will just agree to this? After you walked out on a multi-million-dollar sale?" "They might not," Jackson admitted. "But their rejection would just be part of the story. We'll find another luxury dealership. The point is to show these barriers exist and how we can break them down." Luis, always thinking about the financial angle, chimed in. "We should create a foundation to manage this. You'll need proper structure, especially if you want corporate partners to take you seriously." The meeting continued for hours as they refined the idea. By afternoon, Jackson had committed $5 million of his own money to launch the foundation. They decided to call it Beyond Barriers, a name that encompassed Jackson's vision of helping people move past the limitations others placed on them. 3 days later, Jackson sat across from David Mitchell, the manager of Elite Motors. The same office where Mitchell had eagerly offered him espresso now felt tense and uncomfortable. Richard, the dismissive salesman, was conspicuously absent. "Mr. King, I want to again express our deepest regrets about your experience," Mitchell began. "We've taken appropriate measures with the employee in question." "I'm not here about Richard," Jackson replied. "I'm here to propose a partnership." Mitchell's eyebrows rose in surprise as Jackson laid out his vision for Beyond Barriers and how Elite Motors could be the first corporate partner. "You want us to take on apprentices from disadvantaged areas?" Mitchell asked carefully. "I want you to take on talented young people who would never get through your door otherwise," Jackson corrected him. "And in return you get to be part of something meaningful, and yes, get some good publicity as the first partner in this initiative." Mitchell frowned. "While I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. King, our clientele expects a certain kit standard. Our sales staff reflects the expectations of our customers." "You mean they expect to see people who look like them, not people who look like me?" Jackson challenged. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant," Jackson replied. "Look, I'm giving you a chance to be part of the solution. 5 young people. That's all I'm asking for now. You train them properly, give them a real chance, and we document the journey. And if we decline," Jackson shrugged, "then you decline. And that becomes part of the story too. How even when offered a chance to change, some doors remain closed." 2 hours and 1 call to the dealership's owner later, Mitchell reluctantly agreed to a pilot program. 3 sales apprentices and 2 service technician trainees would join Elite Motors under the Beyond Barriers initiative. The documentary crew would have limited access, and Elite Motors would have some say in how they were portrayed. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next challenge was finding the right candidates. Jackson insisted on being personally involved in the selection process. He returned to his old neighborhood in South Los Angeles and connected with his former high school counselor, who helped spread the word about the opportunity. Applications flooded in. Hundreds of hopeful young people sent videos, letters, and portfolios explaining why they should be chosen. Jackson, Luis, and a small team spent weeks reviewing applications and conducting interviews. One applicant particularly stood out. Darnell was a 22-year-old who had been fixing cars in his uncle's backyard shop since he was 12. He had natural talent, but no formal training or connections to enter the luxury automotive world. "This is exactly the kind of barrier we're trying to break," Jackson told Luis after interviewing Darnell. "The kid knows more about engines than most certified mechanics, but he'd never get past the application stage at a place like Elite Motors." By the time they'd selected all 5 participants, media buzz about Beyond Barriers had started to build. Jackson's publicist had strategically leaked information about the initiative, and speculation was running wild. Some praised Jackson for creating opportunities. Others criticized him, suggesting it was just a publicity stunt after being denied service. The night before the program was set to begin, Jackson couldn't sleep. He paced the length of his home studio, second-guessing everything. "What if I'm setting these kids up for failure?" he asked Devin over the phone. "What if Mitchell and his team sabotage this to prove their point?" "Then we document that too," Devin replied. "But you've got to have some faith, man. You're giving them a shot they wouldn't have otherwise." The next morning, Jackson personally drove to pick up Darnell for his first day. The young man lived in a small apartment with his mother and 2 younger siblings. When Jackson pulled up in his car, neighbors came out to see what was happening. Darnell emerged wearing the only suit he owned, slightly too big and clearly second-hand, but freshly pressed and worn with pride. "Ready to make history?" Jackson asked as Darnell got into the passenger seat. "Nervous as hell," Darnell admitted. "What if I mess up? What if I let everybody down?" "The only way you let people down is if you don't try," Jackson told him. "Remember, you earned this spot. Your knowledge, your passion, that's why you're here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." When they arrived at Elite Motors, the other 4 participants were already waiting outside with the documentary crew. Camera equipment was being set up, and the young people looked both excited and terrified. Mitchell greeted them at the door, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Welcome to Elite Motors," he said stiffly. "We have a training room prepared for your orientation." As they walked through the showroom, Jackson noticed the stares from other employees. Some looked curious, others disapproving. Richard was nowhere to be seen. The training room turned out to be a converted storage space in the back of the building. There were no windows, just fluorescent lighting and folding chairs. "This is where you'll begin your training program," Mitchell explained. "Our senior staff will rotate through to provide instruction on our procedures and expectations." Jackson exchanged glances with the documentary director. This wasn't the integrated, hands-on experience they had discussed. This was segregation, keeping the newcomers out of sight. "Actually," Jackson interjected, "the agreement was for on-the-job training. These apprentices should be paired with your top performers, learning by doing." Mitchell's smile tightened. "We thought it best to start with the basics before putting them on the floor." "The basics can be learned alongside the practical experience," Jackson insisted. "Unless there's some reason you don't want your customers to see them?" The tension in the room was palpable. The cameras caught everything. Mitchell's discomfort, Jackson's determination, the nervous but hopeful expressions of the 5 young participants. Finally, Mitchell relented. "Fine, we'll adjust the program. But if there are any issues, there won't be," Jackson assured him. "These 5 are the best of the best. Just give them a real chance." As Mitchell left to rearrange the training schedule, Darnell approached Jackson. "They don't want us here," he said quietly. "No, they don't," Jackson agreed. "But that's exactly why you need to be here. This isn't just about getting jobs, it's about changing perceptions." What neither Jackson nor the apprentices realized was that across town, a storm was brewing. Richard, the salesman who had dismissed Jackson, hadn't been fired as they assumed. He'd been temporarily reassigned to another branch of Elite Motors, and he was furious about the new program that threatened to change the culture of the dealership he'd worked at for 20 years. And Richard had connections in the luxury automotive world that ran deep, very deep. The first week of the Beyond Barriers program was more difficult than anyone had anticipated. Despite Mitchell's reluctant agreement to provide hands-on training, the reality on the showroom floor told a different story. The 5 apprentices found themselves facing subtle sabotage at every turn. Darnell, assigned to the service department, discovered that the other mechanics forgot to include him in their morning briefings. When customers arrived for service appointments, they were mysteriously directed to other technicians. The tools he needed often went missing, only to reappear hours later after he'd wasted time searching for them. The sales apprentices faced similar obstacles. Tanya, a bright 24-year-old with a business degree from a state university, was repeatedly given busy work like organizing brochures while potential customers were directed to established salespeople. Another apprentice, Victor, was assigned to a corner of the showroom where foot traffic was minimal. "They're setting us up to fail," Tanya whispered to Darnell during their lunch break. They sat at a small table in the back of the employee lounge away from the others. "How am I supposed to learn sales when they won't let me talk to customers?" Darnell nodded glumly. "One of the mechanics actually told a customer I was just the cleanup guy when I tried to explain what was wrong with his car." The documentary crew captured these moments of frustration, but also the determination of the apprentices to push through. Jackson visited regularly, offering encouragement and intervening when necessary. After hearing about Darnell's tools going missing, he personally purchased duplicate sets for each apprentice. "Now they can't use that excuse," Jackson told the camera. "This program is too important to let petty sabotage derail it." Meanwhile, Richard was working behind the scenes to undermine the program. From his temporary position at another dealership branch, he made calls to his old colleagues, encouraging them to resist the changes. More dangerously, he began contacting clients in his extensive Rolodex, wealthy, repeat customers who had been coming to Elite Motors for years. "The place is going downhill," he told them over lunch meetings and golf games. "Mitchell's letting in these kids from the streets with no experience, no understanding of our clientele. Would you want one of them handling your $300,000 vehicle?" By the second week, several longtime customers had called Mitchell to express their concerns about the new program. Mitchell, already lukewarm about the initiative, grew increasingly anxious about potential damage to the dealership's reputation. "The documentary cameras aren't helping," he complained to Jackson during a tense meeting in his office. "My staff feels like they're being watched and judged, and now clients are calling, threatening to take their business elsewhere." Jackson leaned forward. "Who exactly is calling? And what are they saying?" Mitchell waved his hand dismissively. "That's confidential. The point is, this experiment is causing disruption." "It's not an experiment," Jackson corrected him. "It's an opportunity to evolve your business and open doors that have been closed too long. Change is always disruptive at first." "Easy for you to say," Mitchell replied. "You're not the one whose livelihood depends on keeping these clients happy." After the meeting, Jackson gathered the apprentices at a nearby coffee shop. Away from the dealership and the cameras, he wanted them to speak freely about their experiences. "We need absolute honesty here," he told them. "Is this working? Should we pull the plug and find another partner?" The 5 apprentices exchanged glances. Finally, Darnell spoke up. "It's rough, not gonna lie, but I'm learning, even from the resistance. Every time they try to shut me out, I find another way in." Tanya nodded. "Yesterday, I finally got to talk to a real customer when everyone else was busy. She was interested in the new hybrid model, and I knew every specification from studying the manuals at night. She was impressed, said she'd come back to finalize the sale with me specifically." One by one, each apprentice shared similar small victories amid the obstacles. None of them wanted to quit. "That's what I needed to hear," Jackson said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "because I've got a plan to turn this around." The next day, Jackson arrived at Elite Motors with a film crew, not the documentary team, but a crew from a major network morning show. Mitchell nearly choked on his coffee when he saw them setting up in the showroom. "What is this?" he demanded. "You can't just bring in a TV crew without permission." "Actually, I can," Jackson replied calmly. "It's in our agreement. Media coverage of the Beyond Barriers initiative. I'm giving an interview about the program, and I'd like you to join me." Mitchell paled. "On national television now?" "I'm not prepared for—" "It's a friendly interview," Jackson assured him. "A chance to showcase how Elite Motors is pioneering change in the industry." Unless, of course, you'd rather I discuss the resistance the apprentices have faced. 30 minutes later, Mitchell sat stiffly beside Jackson as the interview began. The host, a popular TV personality known for her direct questioning, smiled warmly at the cameras. Today we're joined by music superstar Jackson King and David Mitchell, manager of Elite Motors, to discuss an innovative program breaking barriers in the luxury automotive industry. Jackson, tell us what inspired Beyond Barriers. Jackson shared the story of his rejection at the dealership, carefully avoiding mentioning Richard by name or directly criticizing Elite Motors. Instead, he focused on the positive, how that moment had sparked an idea to create lasting change. And David, the host turned to Mitchell, how has Elite Motors embraced this opportunity to diversify your workforce? Put on the spot with cameras rolling and Jackson beside him, Mitchell had no choice but to be enthusiastic. We're proud to be the first partner in this groundbreaking initiative. These talented young people bring fresh perspectives to our business. And have there been any challenges integrating the apprentices? The host pressed. Mitchell hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. Change always comes with adjustments, but we're committed to making this work. The interview continued with the host asking to speak with some of the apprentices. Darnell and Tanya, prepared by Jackson, spoke eloquently about their experiences, emphasizing their qualifications and passion rather than the obstacles they'd faced. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, word had spread throughout the dealership about the national TV exposure. Suddenly, the apprentices weren't just unwanted additions, they were potential celebrities who could bring positive publicity. That was playing dirty, Mitchell muttered to Jackson after the crew left. That was leveraging the tools we have, Jackson corrected him. Now everyone's watching, including your boss and your competitors. Success isn't just an option anymore, it's a necessity. The national exposure had an immediate impact. The next day, curious customers began asking specifically for the TV apprentices. Elite Motors' social media mentions exploded, with most comments praising the dealership for being progressive and inclusive. But not everyone was pleased with this turn of events. Richard watched the interview from his temporary office across town, his face darkening with each passing minute. His phone began lighting up with texts from former colleagues at Elite Motors. King played Mitchell like a fiddle, one message read. Now the boss is all in on the program. Richard made a decision. If he couldn't kill the program through subtle manipulation, he'd have to take more direct action. He still had one card to play. A connection to Lawrence Harrington, Elite Motors' biggest client and a major investor in the parent company that owned the dealership chain. That evening, as Darnell was finishing his shift, a customer rolled in with a Phantom Spectre, the very same model Jackson had tried to purchase. The owner was a young tech entrepreneur who had made his fortune in cryptocurrency. I saw you on TV this morning, he told Darnell. I've got a weird noise coming from the engine. Mind taking a look? For the first time since joining Elite Motors, Darnell was given a chance to work on their flagship vehicle. He spent hours meticulously examining the car, eventually identifying a minor issue that other mechanics had missed. When he explained the problem and his solution to the owner, using simple terms without talking down to him, the customer was impressed. You've got real talent. Kid, he said, handing Darnell his business card. I've got a collection of cars that need regular maintenance. I'd rather bring them to someone who actually cares. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. Elsewhere in the dealership, the other apprentices were having similar breakthroughs. The tide seemed to be turning in their favor. What they didn't know was that Richard had secured a meeting with Lawrence Harrington for the following day. And Harrington had the influence to shut down not just the program, but potentially the entire dealership if he chose. As Jackson drove home that night, feeling optimistic about the program's new momentum, his phone rang. It was Luis, his business manager. We might have a problem, Luis said, his voice tense. I just heard from a contact at Elite Motors' corporate office. Richard is meeting with Lawrence Harrington tomorrow. Who's Lawrence Harrington? Jackson asked. Only the guy who owns about 30% of the parent company's stock and buys a new car from them every 6 months. If he pulls his business, it would be devastating. Jackson fell silent, thinking through the implications. So Richard's going nuclear. He'd rather hurt the whole dealership than see our program succeed. Looks that way. What's the move? Jackson considered his options. Direct confrontation hadn't worked. Public pressure had helped, but wouldn't be enough against a private investor like Harrington. "We need to change the game entirely," he said finally. "Call Devin and tell him to set up a meeting with my financial team first thing tomorrow. If Richard wants to fight dirty, we need to be prepared to do the same." Jackson arrived at his financial advisor's office at 7 the next morning. The sleek downtown building was mostly empty, with only early-rising executives and cleaning staff moving through the marble lobby. In the conference room, Luis had assembled Jackson's financial team and legal counsel, along with Devin and Zoe. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," Jackson said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "We have a situation that needs immediate action." For the next hour, they discussed options for countering Richard's meeting with Lawrence Harrington. The financial team pulled up research on Elite Motors' parent company, Prestige Automotive Group, revealing that Harrington did indeed hold significant influence as both an investor and a premium client. "Here's what I'm thinking," Jackson said finally. "If Richard's using Harrington's investment power as leverage, we need to change the financial equation." Luis looked skeptical. "You want to buy out Harrington's shares? That would cost tens of millions." "Not his shares," Jackson clarified. "I want to make an offer to purchase Elite Motors directly from Prestige Automotive Group." A stunned silence fell over the room. "That's bold," Devin said finally. "But do you really want to own a car dealership?" Jackson leaned forward. "What I want is to transform one. Imagine if Elite Motors became the model for inclusion in the luxury automotive world. We could expand the apprenticeship program tenfold, create genuine career paths for people who've been shut out of these industries." His legal counsel, a sharp-minded woman named Diane, spoke up. "Prestige Automotive Group is a publicly traded company. They won't sell one of their profitable dealerships on a whim, especially to teach Richard a lesson." "Then we make an offer they can't refuse," Jackson replied. "We offer above market value, with conditions that protect the existing staff's jobs except Richard's." For the next 2 hours, they hammered out details of the offer. Jackson would establish a new holding company to purchase Elite Motors at a 15% premium above its assessed value. The current staff would keep their jobs with guaranteed contracts, and the Beyond Barriers program would become a permanent fixture, eventually expanding to other dealerships within Prestige's network. "This is a massive investment," Luis warned. "Are you sure you want to commit this much capital to making a point?" Jackson shook his head. "It's not about making a point. It's about creating lasting change. The music industry opened doors for me. But what about all the talented kids who aren't musicians or athletes? They deserve pathways too." By 10 o'clock, they had the framework of an offer. Diane would draft the formal proposal while Jackson's team arranged a meeting with Prestige Automotive Group's CEO later that day. Meanwhile, across town, Richard was seated in an opulent private dining room at the Continental Club, across from Lawrence Harrington. Harrington was in his 60s with silver hair and the confident demeanor of someone who had been wealthy for generations. He listened impassively as Richard outlined his concerns about the Beyond Barriers program. "It fundamentally changes the character of Elite Motors," Richard explained, cutting into his steak. "Our clientele expects a certain environment, a certain understanding of their needs. These kids from the inner city simply don't have that understanding." Harrington took a sip of his water, his expression unreadable. "And you believe this will impact the dealership's performance?" "I know it will," Richard insisted. "Several longtime customers have already expressed their discomfort. The sales numbers will reflect it soon enough." "What exactly are you asking me to do, Richard?" Harrington asked directly. "Simply to express your concerns to the board. As a major investor and valued client, your opinion carries weight. The program is still new. It could be ended before any real damage is done." Harrington studied Richard for a long moment. "And your motivation here is purely concern for the business?" Richard hesitated briefly. "Of course. I've been with Elite for 20 years. Its success is my success," Harrington nodded slowly. "I appreciate your bringing this to my attention. I'll look into it personally." As Richard drove back to his temporary office, he felt confident that Harrington would intervene. The Beyond Barriers program would be shut down. Mitchell would be grateful for Richard saving the dealership's reputation, and everything would return to normal. He might even get a promotion out of this. What Richard didn't know was that immediately after their meeting, Harrington made 2 phone calls. The first was to his 25-year-old daughter. who managed his family office's impact investment portfolio and had been pushing him to consider more socially conscious investments. The second was to Mitchell at Elite Motors. "Tell me about this program with Jackson King," Harrington said without preamble. "And I want the truth, not whatever narrative Richard has been spinning." Back at Elite Motors, the apprentices were having their best day yet. Following the national TV exposure, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Other employees, seeing the positive public response, began treating the newcomers with more respect, some out of genuine change of heart, others from pure self-interest. Darnell was allowed to take the lead on servicing a luxury SUV, with other mechanics actually offering guidance rather than obstacles. In the showroom, Tanya was assigned her first solo client, a young professional who had seen the TV segment and requested her specifically. The documentary crew captured these small victories, along with candid conversations between the apprentices about their growing confidence. For the first time, it seemed like the program might actually succeed on its merits rather than through Jackson's intervention. Then Mitchell received a call that Lawrence Harrington was on his way to the dealership for an unscheduled visit. Panic spread quickly among the management team. Harrington rarely visited without advance notice, and when he did, it usually meant he was unhappy about something. Mitchell gathered his senior staff in the conference room, explicitly excluding the apprentices and the documentary crew. "Harrington will be here in 30 minutes, he announced grimly. "Richard met with him this morning, and now he's coming here personally. This could be very bad for all of us. Should we keep the apprentices out of sight?" one manager suggested. Mitchell considered this, then shook his head. "No. He'll know about them already from Richard. Hiding them would look suspicious. Just make sure everything is perfect. And someone call Jackson King. He should be here for this too." Jackson was in the middle of his meeting with Prestige Automotive Group's CEO when he received the urgent message about Harrington's visit. He excused himself, promising to continue their discussion later that afternoon. "Keep working on the offer," he told Luis as they hurried to their car. "This meeting with Harrington might change our approach, but we should be ready to move either way." They arrived at Elite Motors just minutes before Harrington's sleek black limousine pulled up to the entrance. Jackson positioned himself next to Mitchell, who was visibly nervous. "Just follow my lead," Jackson whispered. "This might not be what you think." Harrington entered the dealership with the confidence of someone who owned the place, which, in a way, he did. He was accompanied by a young woman who Jackson would later learn was his daughter, Catherine. They surveyed the showroom with appraising eyes before approaching Mitchell and Jackson. "Mr. Harrington," Mitchell said, extending his hand. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "I'm sure it is," Harrington replied dryly. "And you must be Jackson King. I've heard a great deal about you and your initiative here." "All good things, I hope," Jackson said with a smile, shaking Harrington's hand firmly. "That depends on who's doing the talking," Harrington answered. "I had an interesting breakfast with Richard this morning." Mitchell paled visibly. "Sir, if there have been any concerns raised—" "I'd like to see this program in action," Harrington interrupted. "Show me what these apprentices are actually doing." For the next hour, Jackson and Mitchell gave Harrington and his daughter a tour of the dealership, introducing each apprentice and highlighting their progress. Darnell demonstrated his diagnostic skills on a complex engine issue. Tanya walked through her first successful sale from the previous day. Throughout the tour, Catherine Harrington asked thoughtful questions about the program's structure, the selection process, and plans for expansion. She seemed genuinely interested, taking notes on her tablet and engaging directly with the apprentices. "My father tells me Richard believes this program is damaging Elite Motors' brand," she said bluntly when they returned to Mitchell's office. "What do you say to that?" Mitchell looked trapped, caught between his biggest client and his current commitment to Jackson's program. Jackson answered instead. "I'd say the numbers tell a different story. Media exposure is up 300% since we started. Social media engagement has increased by 250%. 3 apprentices have already contributed directly to sales or service solutions that generated revenue." "And customer complaints?" Harrington asked. 2, Mitchell admitted reluctantly. "But both were from longtime clients who are personal friends of Richard." Harrington nodded thoughtfully, exchanging a glance with his daughter. "I've made my decision," he said finally. Mitchell, please arrange for Richard to return to this location immediately. Mr. King, I'd like you to stay for this conversation as well. An hour later, Richard walked into Mitchell's office, his confident smile faltering when he saw Harrington sitting there with Jackson and Catherine. "Richard," Harrington said coolly, "please close the door." What followed was a conversation that would completely reshape Elite Motors' future, and with it, the lives of 5 young apprentices who had dared to dream of breaking barriers. Richard's confident smile disappeared completely as he took in the scene before him. Lawrence Harrington, his daughter Catherine, Mitchell and Jackson King, all watching him with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright anger. "Please, have a seat," Harrington said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Richard sat stiffly, his eyes darting between the faces in the room. "I assume this is about my concerns regarding the apprenticeship program," he said, attempting to sound authoritative. "Among other things," Harrington replied. "I've spent the morning learning about this initiative. Catherine and I have spoken with each apprentice and reviewed their progress reports." Richard nodded eagerly. "Then you understand my concerns about maintaining our standards." "What I understand," Harrington interrupted, "is that you've been actively working to sabotage a program that has brought positive attention to Elite Motors and introduced genuinely talented individuals to the business." The color drained from Richard's face. "Sir, I was only trying to protect our reputation. Our clientele expects—" "Don't presume to tell me what I expect," Harrington cut in sharply. "I've been a client here for 15 years. What I expect is excellence, innovation, and integrity. 3 qualities these young apprentices have demonstrated despite your efforts to undermine them." Richard looked to Mitchell for support, but the manager kept his eyes down, clearly unwilling to oppose Harrington. Catherine spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "My father's family foundation has been investing in programs supporting economic mobility for years. What Mr. King has created here aligns perfectly with initiatives we've wanted to see in the luxury retail space. The question now," Harrington continued, "is what happens next. Mr. King has made a rather bold proposal." All eyes turned to Jackson, who leaned forward. "I came here today prepared to make an offer to purchase Elite Motors outright," he said. "I believe that might be the only way to ensure the program's survival." Richard's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious," Jackson confirmed. "But Mr. Harrington and his daughter have suggested an alternative approach that might be even more impactful." Catherine opened a folder on the table. "We're proposing a partnership. The Harrington Foundation will provide funding to expand beyond barriers across all of Prestige Automotive Group's dealerships. Mr. King will serve as program director with his foundation managing the apprenticeships. And Elite Motors will be the flagship location," Harrington added, "with some changes to management." The implication hung in the air. Richard squirmed in his seat. "Richard," Mitchell said, finally finding his voice, "effective immediately, your position at Elite Motors is being eliminated." "You can't fire me," Richard protested. "I've been here 20 years. "You're not being fired," Mitchell clarified. "Your position is being eliminated as part of a restructuring. You'll be offered a transfer to our parts warehouse in Nevada, should you wish to remain with the company." Richard's face flushed red. "This is outrageous. Because of some publicity stunt?" "Because you demonstrated poor judgment," Harrington said firmly. "Not just in how you treated Mr. King initially, which was frankly embarrassing, but in your calculated efforts to ensure these young people would fail. That's not protecting standards, Richard. That's protecting privilege." Richard stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. I have contacts throughout the industry. I'll find another position by the end of the week." "That's your choice," Harrington replied calmly. "But I should mention that the Harrington family has investments in most major luxury automotive groups. Your reputation will precede you." Without another word, Richard stormed out, slamming the door behind him. After a moment of tense silence, Mitchell let out a long breath. "Well, that's done. Mr. Harrington, I want to assure you that I'm fully committed to making Beyond Barriers successful here at Elite." "I'm glad to hear it," Harrington replied, "because you'll be working closely with Mr. King going forward." 6 months later, Jackson stood on a small stage in Elite Motors' newly renovated showroom, addressing a crowd of journalists, industry, representatives, and proud family members of the program's participants. Behind him stood 25 apprentices, the original 5+20 new recruits from the program's expansion. When I first walked into this dealership, Jackson began, I was judged before I even opened my mouth. That experience could have ended as nothing more than another frustrating example of the barriers that exist for too many people. Instead, it became the catalyst for change. He gestured to the apprentices behind him. These talented individuals aren't asking for handouts or special treatment. They're asking for opportunity. The chance to prove their abilities in spaces where doors have traditionally been closed. In the front row, Darnell's mother wiped away tears. Next to her sat Tanya's younger siblings, beaming with pride. All around the showroom, photographs showcased the apprentices' journey, their struggles, breakthroughs, and triumphs over the past months. Today, we're announcing that Beyond Barriers is expanding to 15 additional dealerships across the country, Jackson continued. The Harrington Foundation's partnership has been instrumental in making this possible, along with the commitment of Prestige Automotive Group to lead the industry in creating pathways to opportunity. Lawrence and Catherine Harrington nodded in acknowledgement from their seats. Beside them sat several other corporate leaders who had recently signed on as program partners. But numbers and expansion plans don't tell the real story, Jackson said, his voice softening. The real story is about Darnell, who was recently promoted to senior technician after developing a diagnostic protocol that's now being implemented across all Prestige service departments. The crowd applauded as Darnell stepped forward, embarrassed but proud. It's about Tanya, who broke the dealership's sales record for new associates in her third month and is now training other apprentices. Tanya waved as her siblings cheered loudly. Each person standing behind me has a similar story of talent meeting opportunity. And that's what Beyond Barriers is really about. Not charity, but investment in human potential that has too often been overlooked. After the formal presentation, the event transitioned to a celebration. The showroom had been transformed with food stations, music, and interactive displays showing the program's impact. The documentary about the initiative's first 6 months was playing on screens throughout the space, capturing the journey from those difficult early days to the current success. Jackson found a quiet moment to slip away to Mitchell's office, now his office as well, since he divided his time between music and his role as Beyond Barriers executive director. He stood by the window watching the celebration below. Devin found him there a few minutes later. Quite a change from the guy who just wanted to buy a fancy car, Devin remarked. Jackson smiled. Life takes you down unexpected roads sometimes. Speaking of cars, Devin said, did you ever get that Phantom Spectre you wanted? Jackson shook his head. Funny thing, I lost interest in it. There were more important things to focus on. Well, someone thinks you should reconsider. Devin handed him a small box. Inside was a key fob with the Phantom Spectre logo. Attached was a note card that read, "To the man who turned rejection into opportunity for others. Your vision deserves to be matched with precision engineering. LH." Jackson stared at the key in disbelief. Harrington bought me the car? Actually, it's from all of them, Devin said, nodding toward the showroom where the apprentices were celebrating. The Harringtons covered most of it, but every apprentice,